Hello friends, so today we are discussing occlusion and classification of malocclusion. This is relatively a simple chapter and one of the easiest chapters, and most of the questions we can expect from this chapters will be very direct questions. But also you should be able to answer questions based on pictures once you learn the different types of malocclusions, once you see the pictures, they can ask you like a particular case with the certain malocclusions and identify the malocclusions. So that type of questions can be expected, but it will be mostly a very straightforward questions. So let's begin with occlusion and classification of malocclusion. Preferably art and science of orthodontics by Balaji is more than enough for covering this chapter, but please go through profit as well, especially the pictures and the diagram and the charts in these chapters. So let's begin. Now first we will, before going to malocclusions, first we will see about the normal occlusion. What are the ideal features of a normal occlusion? So one of the most important concepts related to normal occlusion was put forward by Andrews in 1970s. He proposed 6 keys to normal occlusion after studying the model of 120 patients with the ideal occlusion. So he considered the presence of these features as essential to achieving an optimal occlusion. So first one is the molar interarch relationship. So the mesiobuccal cusp of the upper first molar should occlude in the groove between the mesial and middle buccal cusp of the lower first molar. Also, the mesiolingual cusp of the upper first molar should occlude in the central fossa of the lower first molar. So in the molar interarch relationship, please look at the picture which is marked as the key 1. The mesiobuccal cusp of the upper first molar is occluding in the groove between the mesial and medial buccal cusp of the lower first molar. So it's about the mesiobuccal cusp. Then the mesiolingual cusp of the upper first molar is occluding in the central fossa of the lower first molar. Now coming to the second key, which is the mesiodistal crown angulation. So please look at the second picture, which is the mesiodistal angulation. Those lines across the long axis of the tooth is being shown. So it makes use of a line that passes along the long axis of the crown, and this line is called as the long axis of the clinical crown. So in an ideal occlusion, the gingival part of the long axis of the crown should be distal to the occlusal part of the line. So please look at the picture. You can see that the lines are showing are passing through the long axis of the crown, and the gingival part of this line will be distal to the occlusal part of the line. So that is the second key, which is the mesiodistal crown angulation. Coming to the third key, which is your labiolingual crown inclination. So this is determined from a mesial or distal view. We have seen crown angulation, mesiodistal crown angulation. Now we are talking about labiolingual crown inclination, which we assess from a mesial or distal point of view. So please look at the picture. Can you see the third key? There are also some red lines along the axis of the tooth, which is to assess your labiolingual crown inclination. So if you view the posterior teeth from a mesial aspect, we can see that the gingival portion of the crown is more lingually placed than the occlusal area. Then it is referred to as positive crown inclination. And if the gingival area of the crown is more labially placed, then it is referred to as a negative crown inclination. Now the anterior teeth will show a positive crown inclination, that is the gingival area of the crown will be more lingually placed, whereas the posterior teeth will be showing a negative inclination, because look at the picture, along the posterior teeth we have shown the red lines. So the gingival area of the posterior teeth will be positioned more buccally than the occlusal area. So these posterior teeth are showing a negative crown inclination, whereas anterior teeth is showing a positive crown inclination. So positive crown inclination is when the gingival area of the crown is more lingually placed. So for anterior teeth there is a positive crown inclination, and for posterior teeth there is a negative crown inclination. Now the fourth key is the absence of rotation, and the fifth key is the tight contact. So tight contacts means there should be tight contact between the adjacent teeth, that is there should not be any spacing or there should not be any crowding also. Now the sixth key is the curve of Spee. So curve of Spee is like a normal occlusal plane will have a curve of Spee not exceeding 1.5 millimeters. Now these are Andrews 6 keys of normal occlusion: molar interarch relationship, mesiodistal crown angulation, labiolingual crown inclination, absence of rotations, tight contacts, curve of Spee. So apart from all the 6 keys, there is a 7th key to a normal occlusion, which is considered as the Bolton's ratio. So we have already seen what's a Bolton's ratio in the chapter when we discussed about the diagnosis and model analysis. So these are the features of a normal occlusion. So we have seen Andrews 6 key of normal occlusion. Now another important aspect of occlusion is there are different occlusal curves, most of which are imaginary or extended curves. So first we will see the curve of Spee. So we have already seen in Andrews 6 key of normal occlusion, the 6th key was curve of Spee. So curve of Spee is an anteroposterior curvature of the occlusal surface, which is beginning at the tip of the lower cuspid, that is at the lower canine, and following the cusp tips of your bicuspids and molars. So curve of Spee is an anteroposterior curvature of the occlusal surface, which is beginning at the tip of the lower cuspid and following the cusp tip of your premolars and the molars. So also note that we have already seen when we were discussing Andrews 6 keys that in an ideal occlusion, the curve of Spee is considered to be at a depth of 1.5 millimeters. Now coming to the second curve. Now the second curve is the curve of Wilson. So please look at the picture. Curve of Wilson actually contacts the buccal and lingual cusp tip of the mandibular buccal teeth. So of the mandibular posterior teeth, the curve passes through the buccal and lingual cusp tips. So there is an inward inclination of this lower posterior teeth. So please look at the picture. When you when you look at the picture, we can see that there is an inward inclination of the lower posterior teeth. So curve of Wilson is a curve that contacts the buccal and lingual cusp tip of the lower posterior teeth. Now the third curve is your curve of Munson. So curve of Munson, it is when you extend the curve of Spee and curve of Wilson to all cusp and incisal edges, you will get a curve of Munson. So by extending the curve of Spee and the curve of Wilson to all cusp and incisal edges, you get the curve of Munson. So it's actually a three-dimensional curvature passing along the occlusal surface of the right and left postmandibular teeth as well as the condyle. So please look at the picture. We can see that it is actually by extending the curve of Spee and curve of Wilson to all the teeth, that is all anterior and posterior teeth. So it's actually a 3D curvature passing along the occlusal surface of right and left posterior teeth as well as your condyles. Now we have seen what is the 6 keys of occlusion, the occlusal curves. So the first man or the first person to classify the malocclusion was Ankel. So this classification was proposed in 1899. He was the father of modern orthodontics. So his classification was based on the anteroposterior relationship of the jaw with each other, and maxillary first permanent molar was considered as the key to Ankel's classification of malocclusion. So Ankel's definition of an ideal occlusion has two components. One was the relationship of the maxillary permanent first molar in relation to the lower first permanent molar, and the second one was based on the line of occlusion. So line of occlusion according to Ankel is a smooth quaternary curve which is passing through the central fossa of the upper molar and across the cinculum of the upper canine and the incisor teeth. So in the upper arch, the line of occlusion, that curve is passing through the central fossa of your posterior teeth, then the cinculum of the upper canine and the incisor teeth, whereas the corresponding line in the lower arch runs along the buccal cusp and the incisal edges of the lower teeth. So he was able to specify the interarch relationship through the line of occlusion as well as the relationship of the maxillary first permanent molar to the lower arch. So these were the two important concepts of Ankel's definition of a normal occlusion. So please note that in the upper arch, the line of occlusion is passing through the central fossa of the molars and the cingulum of the upper canine and the incisors, whereas in the lower arch the line of occlusion is passing through the buccal and incisal edges of the lower teeth. So according to Ankel, the normal occlusion is having two components, as we have seen. One is a line of occlusion, and the second one is the fact that the upper first molars are related in such a way that the mesiobuccal cusp of the upper molar occludes in the buccal groove of the lower molar. So if the teeth are arranged in a smoothly curving line of occlusion and this molar relationship is existing, then the normal occlusion would result. So that is what is the features of the normal occlusion according to Ankel. One is a smoothly curving line of occlusion. The second one is the relationship of the mesiobuccal cusp of the upper molar if it is occluding in the buccal groove of the lower molar. So if these two factors are existing, then the normal occlusion is present. Now coming to the classification of malocclusion. So based on this normal occlusion, based on the deviations from this normal occlusion, Ankel has described three classes of malocclusion. So class 1 is when there is a normal relationship of the molars. So please look at the picture where you can see that the relationship of the molars is ideal. That is, mesiobuccal cusp is occluding in the buccal groove of the lower molar. But the line of occlusion will be incorrect. It can be either due to malposed teeth, rotations or other causes. But the line of occlusion will not be a smooth catenary curve as we have seen previously. But molar relationship will be normal. Now coming to class 2 molar relationship. So class 2 is when the lower molar is distally positioned relatively to the upper molar. So for this the line of occlusion is not specified. It is the molar relationship which is deviated in class 2. The lower molar is distally positioned relative to the upper molar. Now class 3 is when the lower molar is mesially positioned relative to upper molar. So Ankel's classification of occlusion has 4 classes. One is your normal occlusion and then 3 categories of malocclusion: class 1, class 2 and class 3. So please note that normal occlusion and class 1 malocclusion has the normal relationship of molars. In class 1 malocclusion, only the line of occlusion is incorrect. Whereas in class 2 and class 3, the molar relationship is deviated and there is no specification about the line of occlusion. Now, apart from the common classifications of malocclusions, there should be a special mentioning about bimaxillary protrusion. Actually, this is a class 1 malocclusion because the molar relationship will be class 1 and the problem is with the malalignment in the line of occlusion. So, what happens here is that in a bimaxillary protrusion, both the upper and lower arches will be forwardly placed and both the incisors in upper and lower arches will be proclined. So this is a special conditions and we specifically mention these cases as Ankel's class 1 malocclusion with the bimaxillary protrusion, where both the arches are forwardly placed and there is proclination of both upper and lower incisors. But the molar relationship will be class 1 only. So please look at the pictures, especially the profile photographs that is given on your left side. This is extremely important that you identify such cases as bimaxillary protrusion. So there is a circumoral convexity associated with the such cases. Both the arches will be forwardly placed and there will be lip incompetence in most cases. So we have seen what is a class 2 malocclusion. That is when the lower molars are distally positioned. You get Ankel's class 2 malocclusion. But what is further interesting to us is that this malocclusion is further divided into division 1 and division 2. So the major features of a class 2 division 1 malocclusion is that the maxillary central incisors will be proclined for a division 1 malocclusion, whereas for a division 2 malocclusion, the central incisors will be retroclined and the lateral incisors will be proclined. So that is your division 2 malocclusion. Central incisors will be retroclined and lateral incisors will be proclined. So please look at these two pictures and get a clear idea of how a class 2 division 1 malocclusion will look like and class 2 division 2 malocclusion will look like. So because I have told you so many times previously previously also, we are going to write an online exam. So they can ask you, like give a picture like this and then tell you identify the type of malocclusion. So you should be able to identify how a class 2 division 1 malocclusion will appear and a class 2 division 2 malocclusion will appear. Now, as we have already seen that class 2 division 1 malocclusion, the central incisors are proclined. So, obviously, the overjet will be increased in such cases. Whereas in class 2 D2, the central incisors are retroclined and hence the overjet will be reduced. Now, the profile will be convex for division 1 malocclusions because the central incisors are proclined, overjet is increased, so they have a convex profile. Whereas for D2, the profile will be straight and the lips will be short and incompetent for D1 and it is the normal lips for D2. And arch form will be in V-shaped and narrow for D1 and U-shaped and square for D2. So, this is because D1 is showing abnormal muscle activity. There is an increased mentalis and buccinator activity. So, because of this increased buccinator activity, the arch form will be V-shaped and narrow in division 1, whereas there is a normal muscle activity. Perioral muscular activity is normal in D2. So the arch form will be U-shaped and square. So the path of closure will be normal for a D1 and it will be backward for D2, and lower facial height will be normal for division 1, whereas it will be reduced for D2. So please note the lower facial height will be reduced for D2, as well as the path of closure also will show a variation in D2. We have already seen that in the chapter diagnosis. So because of the retroclined central incisors, the mandibles backward positioning will happen. So path of closure will be backward for class 2 D2 and the lower facial height will be reduced for class 2 D2. So these are the major features of a division 1 and division 2 malocclusion in class 2 malocclusions. So please look at the picture, be thorough how it appears, what are the features. Please always remember that it is the proclined central incisors in division 1 with the abnormal muscle activity, and division 2 it is retroclined central incisors, normal muscle activity but backward path of closure and reduced facial height. So now coming to discussions about class 3 malocclusions. So class 3 malocclusions are one in which the lower molars are mesially positioned, and skeletal class 3 relationships will be evident as either retrognathic maxilla, prognathic mandible, or a combination of the both. But there are certain scenarios in which the patient will give you a class 3 appearance, like when you ask the patient to bite in a centric occlusion, the patient will have a class 3 appearance. But this is not a true class 3. That is because the patient is shifting to class 3 malocclusions because of some premature contacts. So there should be a clear idea about how a class 3, true class 3 or skeletal class 3 will appear, and how a pseudo class 3 can manifest. So because it's imperative or it's very extremely important that you identify the class 3 malocclusions as true or pseudo, because your entire treatment planning depends on the diagnosis. So in skeletal class 3, the molar relationship as well as the skeletal relationship will be class 3, and in centric occlusion also it will be a class 3 molar relationship. So when you ask the patients to move the mandible, the path of closure of the mandible will be upward and forward. That is the normal way, upward and forward. And skeletal class 3 is one of the malocclusions which has a strong genetic component. I hope you remember the Habsburg jaw, famous Royal Habsburg jaw is a skeletal class 3 malocclusion. And in such cases, when there is a mandibular prognathism or maxillary retrognathism, when you retrude the mandible, when you try to forcefully retrude the mandible, it will not be possible to retrude the mandible in such a way. So that is the feature, those are the features of the skeletal class 3 malocclusion. Now coming to pseudo class 3 malocclusions, in such cases the molar relationship as well as the skeletal relationship will be class 1, and this will shift to class 3 in centric occlusion. So ideally or normally in a resting position you have a class 1 molar relationship, or skeletal relationship will be also class 1, that your maxilla will be normal, mandible also will be normal. But when you ask the patient to bite in a centric occlusion, this will shift from class 1 to class 3. So this is because the path of closure of the mandible is upwards and forwards, but when there is a point of premature contact, it remains only forward, it doesn't go upward. So your mandible will be brought forward, and this will give you a class 3 appearance. So the etiology for class 3, pseudo class 3 factors can be functional, habitual, or certain dental factors like an instanding lateral incisors which causes prematurities, or it might be due to skeletal factors. So and in pseudo class 3 cases you can forcefully retrude the mandible, because the mandible itself is normal. It's just that when you try to ask the patient to bite in centric occlusion, the mandible will move only forward, not upwards. So we can forcefully bring the mandible into a normal position, which is its retruded normal position. So whereas it's not possible to forcefully retrude the mandible in true class 3 malocclusions. So this picture is really summarizing the Ankel's classification of malocclusions, not only dental but also in a skeletal way. So class 1 molar and jaw relationship is showing the mesiobuccal cusp of the upper permanent first molar occluding in the buccal groove of the lower permanent first molars, and here the skeletal relationship is also class 1 with both the jaws in a symmetric relationship. Now here the dental malocclusion is crowding or spacing or malalignment. Now coming to class 2 relationship, it is class 2 molar and jaw relationship which is shown here. So class 2 molar relationship is when the lower molars are distally positioned. So it is, please note here that it is the distobuccal cusp of the upper arch which is colliding with the lower buccal developmental groove, and if it is a skeletal class 2 malocclusion, it can be due to either a forwardly placed maxilla or a retruded mandible or a combination of the both. And in class 3 molar relationship, you can see the lower molars are far mesially positioned compared to your upper permanent first molars, and this skeletal malocclusion is due to either mandibular prognathism or maxillary retrusion, and please note here that the incisors are in a cross-bite relationship. So this is effectively summarizing your Ankel's classification of malocclusion, both dental as well as skeletal. So we have seen Ankel's malocclusions classifications. Now there are certain modifications to this classifications proposed by other orthodontists. So one of the famous modifications was proposed by Dewey. So his modification of class 1 malocclusion is type 1 with the crowded anteriors. So class 1 malocclusion is further modified into type 1 to type 5. Type 1 is when there are crowded anteriors along with the class 1 molar relationship. Type 2 is when the maxillary incisors are proclined and spaced, and type 3 is when there is an anterior crossbite. Type 4 is where there is a posterior crossbite, and type 5 is the drifting of the permanent teeth into the mesial space due to early extraction of second deciduous molars or second premolars. So these are the further modifications of Ankel's class 1 proposed by Dewey. So class 1 malocclusion, if you remember it, it was having a normal molar relationship. The variations or the error was in the line of occlusion. It was not a smooth line of occlusion. So Dewey is specifying what are the errors occurring in the line of occlusion. So type 1 is due to crowded anteriors. Type 2 is when the maxillary incisors are proclined and spaced. Type 3 is when there is an anterior crossbite. Type 4 when there is a posterior crossbite, and type 5 is the drifting of the permanent molar teeth due to early extraction of the second deciduous molars or second premolars. So in the same manner, the class 1 has been further classified by Dewey. He has also proposed modifications to Ankel's class 3 malocclusions. So class 3 malocclusion is further classified into three categories. Type 1 is there is a normal alignment of the upper and lower arches, and the upper and lower anteriors are in edge to edge relationship. So type 1 is there is normal alignment of the upper and lower arches, but the upper and lower anteriors are in edge to edge relationship. Type 2 is the mandibular incisors will be crowded and they will be in a lingual relation to maxillary incisors. So first one is there is an edge to edge relationship of the upper and lower anteriors. Type 2 is mandibular incisors will be crowded and in a lingual relation to maxillary incisors. Now type 3 is maxillary incisors are crowded and crossbite relation is there with respect to mandibular anteriors. So type 1 is normal alignment in both upper and lower arches and incisors. Upper and lower incisors are in edge to edge relationship. Type 2 is when the mandibular incisors are crowded and lingually positioned with respect to maxillary incisors, and type 3 is when the maxillary incisors are crowded and they are showing a crossbite relationship. Now another classification of malocclusion proposed by Lischers is there. So he has given a new terminology to the different malocclusions. So the first one is neutro-occlusion. Neutro-occlusion is like synonymous with Angel's class 1 occlusion. So neutro-occlusion. So it's like then synonymous with Angel's class 1 malocclusion. Disto-occlusion is like if it is distally positioned, the mandible and lower molar. So it is Angel's class 2 malocclusion. Then mesio-occlusion is similar to Angel's class 3 malocclusion. Bucco-occlusion is when there is a buccal placement of the teeth. Linguo-occlusion is when there is a lingual placement of the teeth. And supra-occlusion. So supra-occlusion is when the teeth has erupted beyond the normal occlusal level. So it is supra-occlusion. So we have seen supraocclusion when the teeth has erupted beyond the normal level of occlusion. Infraocclusion is when the teeth has not erupted to the normal occlusal level. So supra and infraocclusions. Then mesioversion and distoversion. So mesioversion is when the teeth has erupted mesial to the normal position. Distoversion is when the teeth has erupted distal to its normal position. Now transversion. So transversion is when there is a transposition of the teeth. When there is an interchange in the position of the teeth, it is called as transversion. Axiversion is when there is an abnormal axial inclination of the teeth. And torsiversion. So torsiversion is a little bit confusing. It is the rotation of the teeth. So other terminologies like you can remember it more easily, because supra, infra occlusions is like if it is beyond the occlusal level, supra, not up to the occlusal level, it is infra. Mesio and distoversions, mesial to normal position, distal to normal position. Now transversion, trans is referring to your transposition. So transversion is like your transposition of the teeth, and axiversion is abnormal axial inclination. But torsiversion, when you get like that, you will be little bit confused. So please always remember, and it is torsiversion, it is referring to the rotation of a tooth. So we have seen Angel's classification of malocclusions, Dewey's modification to it, Lischers' classification of malocclusion. It's like he has given a new terminologies to Angel's classification of malocclusions. Now we will be discussing about Simon's classification of malocclusion. So this is one craniometric classification of malocclusions. So please remember which of the, like if they ask you which classification of malocclusion is a craniometric one, then it is Simon's classification of malocclusion. So Simon's law of canine is what forms the basis of his classification. So the law of canine states that the orbital plane, that is dropped down from the inferior orbital margin and directly under the pupil of the eye, it passes through the distal third of the upper canine. So orbital plane passes through the distal third of the upper canine. So this is what orbital law of canine by Simon states. So Simon's classification of malocclusion is based on the deviation of the arches from their normal position in relation to three planes. So first we will see the Frankfurt horizontal plane. So this is a plane that connects the upper margin of the external auditory meatus to the infraorbital margins. So it's actually classifying the malocclusions in a vertical plane. So Frankfurt horizontal plane is classifying it's the basis for classifying the malocclusions in a vertical plane. So when the dental arch or a part of it is very close to the Frankfurt horizontal plane, then it is called as attraction, that is coming close to it. But if it is away from the Frankfurt horizontal plane, it is called as abstraction. Now coming to the orbital plane. So orbital plane, we have already seen orbital plane passes through the lower bony orbital margin directly under the pupil of the eye, and according to Simon it should pass through the distal third of your upper canine. So this is actually classifying the malocclusions in an anteroposterior direction or sagittal direction. So if the dental arch is coming away from the orbital plane, if it is going away from the orbital plane, it is protraction. In an anteroposterior plane, if the dental arch is moving ahead of the orbital plane or farther away from the orbital plane, it is called as protraction. Whereas if it is coming closer to the orbital plane, it is called as retraction. Now coming to the mid-sagittal plane. So this is used to describe the malocclusions in a transverse plane, and when the part or whole of the arch is coming close to the mid-sagittal plane, it is called as contraction. So if the arch is getting contracted, that is, it is coming close to your mid-sagittal plane. But if it is moving away from the mid-sagittal plane, it is called as distraction. So these are the basis for the classification proposed by Simons. The three important planes are Frankfurt horizontal plane, orbital plane, and your mid-sagittal plane. Frankfurt horizontal plane is classifying the malocclusion in a vertical plane. Orbital plane is used as a reference for classification of malocclusion in the anteroposterior or sagittal plane, and mid-sagittal plane is used to classify the malocclusion in the transverse plane. So in 1960s, Ackermann and Profit has proposed a system of classification which is based on a Venn symbolic diagram. So this has an advantage, or features of this classification was that it included transverse as well as vertical discrepancies. So angles classification was mostly considering only anteroposterior or sagittal malrelations. Ackermann and Profit system also included transverse as well as vertical discrepancies, and also crowding and arch symmetry also was evaluated, and incisor protrusion was also taken into account. So since it was I already mentioned, it was like a symbolic diagram, symbolic system of classification making use of the Venn diagrams. So basically it is classified into 5 major characteristics. So look at this picture, you can see that the outermost envelope was composed of alignment. So in a Venn diagram, the outermost set is composed of the alignment, intra-arch alignment, which can be an ideal alignment or a crowded one, or there might be spacing. Now moving on to the subset of it, the second one is your profile. So profile can be again convex, concave, straight, and the divergence can be anterior divergence or posterior divergence. So note that the first main set is regarding to your alignment. So alignment can be ideal, crowded, or spacing. Then moving to the subset, that is your profile. So profile can be convex, concave, and straight, and divergence can be anterior or posterior divergence. Now coming to the 3 subsets, that is further to profile, you have 3 common or 3 subsets which are of equally important, not like one within the other. These 3 subsets are equally important. So this includes your sagittal deviations, your transverse deviations, and your vertical deviations. So sagittal deviations are similar to what we have seen in Ankel's classification of malocclusion. It can be class 1, class 2, and class 3. and it can be skeletal as well as dental. Now coming to vertical deviations can be an open bite or a deep bite. So open bite can be anterior or posterior, deep bite can be anterior, and this again can be either dental or skeletal. Now transverse deviations can be buccal as well as palatal, and this can be unilateral or bilateral, and again the deviations can be either skeletal or dental. And also understand that they are not representing individual transverse, sagittal or vertical deviations. This can be combined. So either it can be a sagittal deviation or it can be a sagitto-vertical. Both can happen together, or it can be vertical transverse deviation. So this is very comprehensive. They are not considering the deviations as individual sets. They are considering the possibilities of deviations occurring both in two planes, either transverse or sagittal or vertical, and as well as vertical or transverse. And in addition to that, the deviations in three planes can also happen. So they are combining these three together, and you can see that in the combination, in the union of all three deviations, there can be trans, sagittal and vertical deviations. So this is a symbolic diagram or symbolic representation of your malocclusions. So the questions can also appear like that. Earlier when you go through a dental pulse or anything, you can see that they are asking you questions like what is the outermost set in Ackermann's profit classification, or what is the second set in Ackermann's profit classification. But since we are now giving an online exam, they can themselves give this diagram to you, and one of these sets can be missing. Like they will give you outer set as alignment, that will be written there, and then transverse, sagittal and vertical deviations might also be written there, but this profile might be missing. So they will put a question mark over there, or might be a cross mark over there, and they will ask you identify the set of malocclusions represented in this Venn diagram. So the options can be either alignment, trans, sagittal, vertical deviations. Third option might be your profile, and fourth option might be sagittal vertical deviations. So the answer will be profile. So that kind of questions we have to expect from this chapter. Now coming to canine relationships or canine system of classification of malocclusions. So in some cases your permanent first molars, either lower or upper, might be missing bilaterally as well as unilaterally. So in such cases it is a bit difficult to classify the malocclusions. So in such scenarios most of the practitioners resort to classification systems based on your canines, because canines are one of the most stable teeth in your arch, and it is least likely to get exfoliated prematurely, or the damage like caries or something are probably less occurrence for caries and canines as well, but the chances of impaction are there, but still it's considered as one of the cornerstones of your dental arch. So if the first molars, permanent molars, are missing, then most practitioners resort to canine system of classification. So it is again just like what we have seen in molar relationship, canine relationship is also classified as class 1, class 2 and class 3. So class 1 is when the mesial incline of your upper canine overlaps with the distal incline of your lower canine. So please look at the picture and note that class 1 canine is when the mesial incline of your upper canine overlaps with the distal incline of your lower canine. Now class 2 is when completely, class 2 full unit, it happens when the distal incline of your upper canine contacts with the mesial incline of your lower canine. So class 2 completely, it is distal incline of your upper canine contacts the mesial incline of the lower canine. Now class 3 is when your lower canine is placed forward to your upper canine. So it is slightly positioned further forward to your upper canine, your lower canine, then it is a class 3. Now, apart from this class 1, class 2 and class 3, there can be class 2 half unit or an end-on relationship of the canine when the cusp tip of the upper canine contacts with the cusp tip of the lower canine. So, this is the classification of your canine relationships. So, please note that the class 1. So, always remember class 1. So, it will be easy for you to identify class 2 and class 3. Please look at the picture. They might give you cases of canine relationships as pictures and ask you to identify the relation. So, if the mesial incline of your upper canine contacts with the distal incline of your lower canine, then it is class 1. So, that is your class 1 relationship, mesial of upper contacting with the distal of your lower. Now, if this canine, upper canine is positioned further anteriorly, then the distal incline of your canine, upper canine, will contact with the mesial incline of your lower canine. Then it is a class 2. And if your lower canine is positioned further forward from a class 1 position, then it becomes a class 3 canine relationship. So we have seen the major systems of classifications, their modifications and etc. So now we will quickly go through some terminologies. This is not as such included in any system of classification of malocclusions, but when certain malocclusions are presented, they are named or they are called upon by certain terminologies. So the first one we are seeing is your scissors bite. So please note that it is scissors bite, it not scissor bite, it is scissors bite. So this is a condition when which the mandibular arch will be completely within your maxillary arch. So that is called as scissors bite. It can be sometimes a single tooth, like your single premolar, one mandibular premolar will be completely within the upper premolars. So that is also a unilateral or a single case of scissors bite. Or sometimes your entire mandibular arch will be present within the maxillary arch. So then it is called as Brodie's bite or telescopic bite. Now coming to the second terminology we are discussing is your Sunday bite. So Sunday bite is when, most probably when class 2 patients with mandibular retrognathism, they try to improve with their profile by biting the mandible forward. When they are biting, they tend to bring the mandible forward and will give you a more straight appearance. So it is called as Sunday bite because mostly when people go to churches during Sunday, see, these are all derived from American literature and European literature. So mostly Sundays when they go outside to meet people, they try to improve their profile by bringing the mandible forward. So this is why it is called as a Sunday bite. Now, apertognathia is another term for open bite, and deep bite is also called as closed bite. So when you are given terminology like closed bite, it is just another term for describing deep bite. And imbrication is also a terminology referring to lower anterior crowding. So scissors bite is also called as Brodie's bite or telescopic bite. Now Sunday bite, it is seen when the mandible is brought forward, especially in class 2 patients with mandibular retrognathism. Apertognathia, it is also called as it is the term referring open bite, and deep bite is also referred to as closed bite, and imbrication is nothing else, it is the lower anterior teeth crowding. Now, since we are already discussing about the malocclusions, we will also discuss about the problems in speech related to malocclusions. So, certain speech sounds are affected in certain kinds of malocclusions. So, this is a table I have taken from Profit. So, this is extremely important that to identify the type of speech sounds which are deviated in a malocclusion. Now, S, Zs, these speech sounds are called as sibilants, S and Z. Now, in open bite cases, or if there is a large gap between the incisors, the air will escape when you pronounce such sounds. So, this problem is called as lisping. So, lisping is seen in open bite, anterior open bite cases and cases where there is large gap between your incisors. Now, T and D, these are linguoalveolar stops. So when you just try to pronounce these words by yourself, T and D. So it's touching your linguoalveolar stops. So there might be difficulty in producing these sounds when there is irregular incisors, especially the lingual position of your maxillary incisors, because your lower tongue is coming in contact with the palatal surface, that is the lingual surface of this upper anteriors. So when there is a irregular incisors, especially when there is lingual position of the maxillary incisors, it will be difficult to produce T and D, that is linguoalveolar stops. Now, cases of labiodental fricatives, when you are saying F and V, these are called as labiodental fricatives. If it is a skeletal class 3 cases, that is due to mandibular prognathism or maxillary retrognathism, this labiodental fricatives are distorted. Now, in addition to lisping, anterior open bite also causes distortion of linguodental fricatives, that is dha, sha, ish. That sounds, they are distorted in anterior open bite cases. So in anterior open bite cases, you produce lisping. Lisping is due to the sibilants are not expressed properly. Also, anterior open bite can causes distortion of linguodental fricatives like dha, sha, sh. So that sounds are also distorted. Now labiodental fricatives F and V are distorted in skeletal class 3, and your irregular incisors, especially palatally positioned upper incisors, can cause disturbances or difficulty in production of linguoalveolar stops. So linguoalveolar stops are T and D. And in class 2 division 1 cases, bilabial sounds are distorted. So bilabial, when both the lips are coming together in contact, M, mama, papa, when you say all that things, both the lips will be coming into contact for 1 second. So these are distorted in class 2 division 1 malocclusions. So we have discussed mostly regarding malocclusions in this chapter, but apart from this, we are just discussing about soldering and fluxes in this chapter, because a few questions have come up, are being discussed in this chapter in your Dental Pulse textbook. So soldering is when joining metals by using a filler material which has a lower temperature than that of the metals being joined. So soldering is by use of a material, of a filler material that have a lower fusion temperature than that of the metals being joined, and the fusion temperature of the filler materials will always be less than 450 degrees Celsius. So what if the fusion temperature of the filler material is more than 450 degrees Celsius? Then the process is termed as bracing. So the commonly used soldering materials are gold, silver, copper, zinc and nickel. So please note that the basically soldering is involving a filler material that has a lower fusion temperature than that of the metals being joined, which is less than 450 degrees Celsius, and if it is more than 450 degrees Celsius, it is called as bracing. Now talking about fluxes. So flux is something used to remove the oxide layer and to improve the flow of the molten solder. So when you're about to solder two metals, you apply a flux. So that is to remove the oxide layer and to improve the flow of the molten solder. It also dissolves any surface impurities and prevents the oxidation of the metals and reduces the melting point of the dental solder. So that is why you use a flux before soldering two materials. You apply a flux. One is to remove the oxide layer, improve the flow of the molten solder, and to dissolve any surface impurities of the metals and prevents oxidation of the metals and reduces the melting point of your dental solder. So commonly used flux are borax 55%, boric acid 35%, silica is 10%, and fluoride flux. So fluoride flux is borax and boric acid and potassium fluoride in 1:1 ratio. So that is fluoride flux. So borax 55%, boric acid 35%, silica 10%, and fluoride flux, that is a combination of boric acid and potassium fluoride in 1:1 ratio.
Now, anti-flux is used, that is to confine the flow of the molten solder over the metal being joined. So, a flux is used to improve the flow of the molten solder, but too much flow of the molten solder is also not desirable. So, what we use is an anti-flux to confine its flow to the metals being soldered. So this can be lead pencil markings, graphite lines, or iron rouge. So lead pencil markings, graphite lines, and iron rouge are your anti-flux materials. So we have concluded this chapter. This is a relatively simple chapter coming when you're coming to the clinical aspects of the orthodontics, but very significant because this forms the foundation of orthodontics. Actually, this is a part of your diagnosis chapter. When you are doing the observation or diagnosis of a patient, it is important first of all to identify which type of malocclusion is this. So it is extremely important that you go through diagrams, especially with regard to Simon's classification of malocclusion, Angle system of classification of malocclusion, Ackermann-Profit system of classification, and Canine system of classification. So all these things you can expect as picture based questions. They can give you a type of malocclusion and ask you to identify the type of malocclusion. So apart from the common systems of classification, they can also ask you questions regarding to scissors bite, or they might give you an open bite, and in options they might not give you open bite as such. They might ask you the terminology apertognathia. So that kind of questions it can be expected. So please try to answer the questions. All the best.